"You expect this court to believe forgiveness proves innocence, Mr. Mercer?" the company lawyer said, and the room leaned forward like it wanted Caleb to break. Caleb Mercer did not break. In his faded denim shirt and worn work boots, he stepped beside Nolan Price, the man blamed for confirming his ruin, and placed one calloused hand on Nolan's shaking shoulder. "I forgive him," Caleb said. Lily clutched her backpack in the second row. Nolan's brown envelope slipped, and a red, oil-stained lockout tag R217 showed beneath the courtroom lights. Victor Harlan's smile vanished. "Control that," he whispered to his lawyer. 3 hours earlier, the hallway outside courtroom smelled like floor wax, raincoats, and old paper warmed under fluorescent bulbs. Caleb stood near a wooden bench with his metal lunchbox at his feet, the same one Lily had decorated years ago with a crooked green star sticker because, she had said, every working dad needed a star to find his way home. He had polished that lunchbox the night before, not because it would help the case, but because Lily had asked if the judge would know he used to bring dinner to night shift. Caleb told her judges looked at facts, not lunchboxes. Still, he brought it. Lily sat beside him now, 9 years old, knees together, fingers locked around her backpack straps, watching grown-ups move like they all knew where the truth had been stored. Across the hall, Victor Harlan stood beneath a framed county seal, Silver Family's first worker fund pin shining on his lapel. He spoke softly to a reporter, his voice warm enough to sell comfort. "Our company has always protected working families," he said, one hand over his heart. Caleb looked down at his boots. He did not answer. Men like Victor did not need to raise their voices. Their suits did it for them. Then Nolan Price appeared at the far end of the hall, thinner than Caleb remembered, gray at the temples, carrying a brown envelope pressed against his ribs. For years ago, Nolan had signed the report that turned Caleb from a careful maintenance technician into a cautionary tale. One signature had taken Caleb's job, his health insurance, half his savings, and the way people looked at him in the grocery store. Nolan saw Caleb and stopped walking. His breath caught. Caleb could hear it, small and uneven, under the buzz of the lights. Lily tugged Caleb's sleeve. "Daddy, is that him?" she whispered. Caleb nodded once, gently, so she would not mistake truth for hatred. "That's Mr. Price." The courtroom doors opened with a low wooden groan. Inside, Judge Marion Bell took the bench with a face that promised no favors. The company's lawyer arranged his papers in clean stacks. Victor sat behind him, calm again, as if his kindness had been pressed back into place. When Nolan was called forward, a few people turned to stare at Caleb, waiting for anger, waiting for the poor single father to finally become what the company file said he was. Caleb felt Lily watching him. He felt the weight of rent due Friday, the old accusation, the dead worker's name no one from Harlan seemed willing to say. So he stood, not fast, not proud, and walked toward Nolan. The room tightened. Nolan whispered, "Caleb, I can't undo it." Caleb looked at the man's trembling hands, then at the sealed envelope crushed against his chest. "Forgiveness is not permission to keep lying," he said. That was when the envelope slipped, the red tag flashed under the light, and Victor Harlan whispered one sentence too quickly for an innocent man. "That shouldn't be here. That shouldn't be here." The whisper did not travel far, but it traveled far enough. Caleb heard it because men who had spent years listening to machines learned to hear small sounds under louder ones. A belt slipping before it snapped, a valve clicking before pressure rose, a lie tightening before it broke. Victor Harlan's lawyer, Marcia Keene, touched his sleeve without looking at him. "Mr. Harlan, handle it. We will. Now." The 3 words were clean, quiet, professional, but Caleb felt Lily shrink behind him as if the air itself had changed temperature. Judge Marion Bell looked over the rim of her glasses, not at Caleb first, but at the space between Victor's hand and the attorney's legal pad. Her pen paused. Then the room resumed its polished breathing. Papers slid. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed into a fist. The red corner of the tag disappeared again as Nolan Price bent down too quickly, shoving it back into the brown envelope with hands that shook so badly the paper made a dry, papery rasp against his suit coat. Caleb did not reach for it. He did not point. He did not accuse. He stepped back because Lily was watching, and because dignity sometimes meant leaving the truth untouched long enough for the right eyes to notice it. Marcia Keene rose with the kind of smile that did not need warmth to be convincing. Her navy suit was smooth, her pearl earrings still, her voice measured enough to sound merciful. Your Honor, before emotions overtake procedure, Harlan Industrial Foods would like to renew its good faith offer to resolve this unfortunate matter with compassion. The word compassion landed on the courtroom floor like a polished coin. It looked valuable until someone picked it up. A clerk carried a folder to Caleb's table. The folder was cream-colored, thick, expensive. Caleb's own papers were held together by a bent paperclip Lily had painted with blue marker the night before. Keene continued, $12,000 in immediate assistance, partial debt relief through our family's first worker fund, and a neutral public statement allowing both sides to move forward. Neutral? Caleb asked. Responsible? Whose responsibility? Mr. Mercer. Her smile tightened by one thread. This is not the time. The courtroom lights hummed above them. Caleb looked down at the document. The first page used words like closure, healing, family stability. The second page asked him to acknowledge that his statements about Press Line 3 had created confusion about Harlan's safety culture. The third page contained a non-disparagement clause, a media release, and a paragraph that would make him apologize without using the word lie. His thumb stopped on one sentence. He read it twice, not because he didn't understand it, but because he understood it too well. Lily leaned closer, too small for the bench, her feet not quite touching the floor. Her fingers moved to the metal lunchbox beside Caleb's chair, and she covered the crooked green star sticker with her palm as if someone might take that too. Keene turned slightly toward the gallery, where two local reporters sat with phones face down but cameras ready. Mr. Mercer is a struggling father. We recognize the financial strain this process has placed on him. Our fund exists precisely for families like his. There it was, the knife wrapped in a blanket. Victor Harlan lowered his eyes with practiced sadness. The Silver family's first pin on his lapel caught the light, bright as a small moon. Caleb could smell old varnish from the courtroom rail, printer ink from the settlement papers, and the faint trace of Lily's strawberry hand sanitizer from where her small hand still pressed the lunchbox. Is this an offer? Judge Bell asked. Or a condition of silence? Keene did not blink. It is a path toward healing, Your Honor. It says he must issue a statement. A clarification. It references Press Line 3. Keene paused. Not long. Just long enough. That is standard language. Caleb looked up then. Standard for a machine you said wasn't part of this hearing? The room shifted. Not dramatically. Not like the movies. More like a congregation noticing the preacher had skipped a line in scripture. A juror's shoe stopped tapping. Nolan Price stared at the settlement folder as though the words had grown teeth. Judge Bell wrote something down. Slow and neat. Victor placed 2 fingers against his cufflink and adjusted it. But Caleb saw the movement for what it was. Not vanity, not habit, but control searching for somewhere to live. Keene recovered. Mr. Mercer, with respect, you are not an attorney. You may be reading more into legal language than it contains. A soft laugh came from the back row, the kind of laugh people use when they want to stand with power without admitting it. Caleb let it pass over him. He had heard worse in grocery aisles, at school pickup, outside the hardware store where men who once nodded at him began studying their receipts instead. He looked at Lily, not the lawyer. Baby, he said quietly, you remember what I told you about rent money? Lily swallowed. It matters. And truth. Her voice was barely a breath. It matters more. Caleb turned back to the table and set the folder down as gently as if it were breakable. My daughter can survive being poor, he said. She should not have to survive me signing a lie. For the first time, the kindness on Victor's face did not return fast enough. Judge Bell's eyes moved from Caleb's worn sleeves to Lily's hand covering the green star sticker, then to Nolan Price, whose lips had gone pale. And on the settlement page Caleb had refused to sign, the phrase press line 3 sat in black ink. Too specific to be mercy and too careful to be a mistake. The words press line 3 stayed on the page after Caleb set the settlement folder down. Black ink on cream paper, too neat for a mistake and too quiet to ignore. Judge Bell called a 15-minute recess, and the courtroom released its breath in small, private sounds. Chair legs scraping, leather bags snapping shut, reporters whispering into phones, the soft rustle of expensive fabric moving away from old pain. Caleb gathered his papers slowly, not because there were many, but because Lily was watching the way his hands moved. He tucked the bent blue paper clip back over the top sheet, lifted his metal lunchbox, and nodded once to the bailiff as if leaving a courtroom with your name still under accusation required the same manners as leaving church. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a tired electric hum. Rain tapped against the tall courthouse windows, turning the glass gray. Lily walked close enough that her sleeve brushed Caleb's wrist. "Daddy," she whispered, "why did they say helping us was healing if it made you look bad?" Caleb stopped beside the wooden bench where his coat hung over the back. For a moment, the question reached a place in him no lawyer had managed to touch. He thought of his late wife folding Lily's baby clothes at the kitchen table, saying a child should never have to learn shame from the adults who failed her. He looked down at Lily and adjusted the strap of her backpack where it had twisted against her shoulder. "Sometimes people wrap a wrong thing in soft words," he said. "That does not make it soft." Across the hallway, Victor Harlan stood with Marcia Keene and 2 assistants. Beneath the emergency exit sign, their voices were low, professional, controlled. Marcia held a phone angled close to her body, one thumb moving fast. Victor never looked directly at Caleb. That was part of the performance. A powerful man could erase you more politely by refusing to see you. Then a sound cut through the hallway, small at first, then sharp enough to turn heads. Nolan Price was coughing. Not a normal cough. It came from deep in his chest, dry and panicked. The sound of air refusing a man who already looked like he had run out of every other mercy. He gripped the wall near the drinking fountain, his brown envelope crushed under one elbow, his other hand fumbling at his jacket pocket. The envelope slipped. His inhaler skittered across the tile. A bronze recovery coin rolled in a crooked circle and fell flat near Caleb's boot. No one moved for half a second. One of Victor's assistants stepped forward, then stopped when he noticed the small black dome of the hallway camera above the clerk's office. Marcia caught his wrist with 2 fingers, barely a touch, but enough. Victor turned his face away as if giving a man privacy could look exactly like abandoning him. Caleb saw it all. The hesitation, the calculation, the way kindness became a legal risk in the hands of people who managed appearances for a living. Lily squeezed his hand. "Dad." Caleb handed her the lunchbox. "Stay by the bench, baby." He crossed the hall without hurry, because panic fed on panic, and knelt beside the man who had signed his name onto Caleb's ruin. "Nolan." "I can't," Nolan rasped. "I can't breathe." "I know. Look at me." "Caleb, Not now." Caleb picked up the inhaler, shook it once, checked the mouthpiece for dust from the courthouse floor, then placed it into Nolan's trembling hand. Nolan missed his own mouth the first time. Caleb steadied his wrist, not hard, not tender in a way that asked to be seen, just steady enough. "Slow in," Caleb said. "Hold it." Again. Nolan obeyed. The first breath came ragged. The second came with a wet, shameful sound from the back of his throat. The third finally reached him. Caleb opened the cap on Lily's water bottle and held it out. Nolan took it with both hands like a cup at communion. The recovery coin lay on the floor between them, stamped with the words 4 years clean. Caleb picked it up, wiped it against the cleanest part of his sleeve, and placed it in Nolan's palm. He did the same with the brown envelope. It had fallen open just enough for the red edge of lockout tag R217 to show again, a slice of old warning color against the dull courthouse tile. Caleb's eyes touched it for 1 second. He saw oil darkening the corner. He saw the scorched edge. He saw nothing more, because he closed the flap and returned it without looking inside. Nolan stared at him, horrified. You didn't open it. It is yours to hand over. After what I did to you? Especially after what you did to me. Nolan's face twisted. I took your job. I took your name. Caleb sat back on his heels. His knees ached. Rent was due Friday. His truck needed a water pump. Lily had outgrown her winter coat and had not said a word about it because she had learned too early how to be gentle with a worried father. All of that moved through Caleb's chest, but none of it made him cruel. A lie did that, he said. You're still a man, Nolan. At the courtroom door, Judge Marion Bell stood half in shadow, her hands still on the brass handle. She had seen enough to know this was not performance. The jury was gone, the reporters were down the hall, and Caleb had every reason to let Nolan fall apart alone. Her expression did not soften into belief. It sharpened into attention. Behind Victor, Marcia looked down at her phone, and for one brief angle of light, the screen reflected in the courthouse window. Price is breaking. Keep him away from our 217. Lily, still by the bench, saw the reflection too, though she did not understand all of it. She only held the lunchbox tighter and looked at the green star under her thumb. Nolan closed his fingers around the envelope as if it had grown heavier than paper, and when he whispered, I need to tell the judge something, Caleb finally understood that the kindness no one applauded had just opened the first locked door. When Nolan Price asked to speak, the first person to move was not the judge, or the clerk, or even the bailiff. It was Marcia Keene. She rose so quickly her chair gave a short wooden scrape across the floor, and every head in Courtroom 4 turned toward her polished calm as if she had been waiting for exactly this emergency. Your Honor, Mr. Price has just had a medical episode. He is not fit to testify, and Mr. Mercer had direct contact with him during recess. The accusation did not need to be loud. It only needed to be shaped like procedure. Caleb stood beside his table with Lily's metal lunchbox in one hand and the cold mark of Nolan's inhaler still in his memory. He could feel the room reassembling the story around him. Poor father, desperate lawsuit, private hallway, frightened witness, mysterious envelope. That was how a good lie worked. It did not invent everything. It only arranged true pieces in the cruelest order. Judge Marion Bell looked down from the bench, her expression steady, not cruel, not kind. Mr. Mercer, did you speak with Mr. Price during recess? Caleb did not look at Victor. He did not look at the reporters. He looked at the judge. Yes, Your Honor. Did you discuss his testimony? No. Did you view the contents of his envelope? No. Marcia Keene turned slightly, giving the gallery a small, sorrowful look, as though Caleb had disappointed her by being exactly as inconvenient as she expected. Your Honor, with respect, the court cannot rely on the word of a party who benefits from whatever Mr. Price now claims to remember. Nolan flinched as if the sentence had touched a bruise. The fluorescent light above the witness table flickered once, then steadied. Caleb heard Lily shift behind him, the faint zipper sound of her backpack rubbing the bench. He wanted to turn and tell her this was all right. But it was not all right yet. It was only survivable. Judge Bell folded her hands. Mr. Price, are you asking to change or supplement prior testimony? Nolan's throat moved. He clutched the brown envelope against his chest. I'm asking to stop hiding. A hush crossed the room, thin as breath on glass. Victor Harlan leaned back, his silver family's first pin catching the light, his face composed again. He did not look angry. Anger would have made him human. Instead, he looked disappointed, the way powerful men look when a weaker man fails to stay useful. Marcia lifted one hand. Then I must object to any introduction of that envelope absent chain of custody. Judge Bell nodded once. Sustained in part. The court will inspect the item for identification only. It is not admitted as evidence. The clerk approached Nolan with gloved hands and a clear evidence sleeve. Nolan hesitated. Caleb saw his fingers tighten around the envelope, not greedily, not defensively, but like a man handing over the last ugly piece of his soul. The paper rasped when he let it go. The clerk carried it to the bench, opened it carefully, and for the first time the entire courtroom saw the red tag under full light.
Lockout Tag R217.
The letters were faded but legible. The top edge was scorched dark, the left corner rubbed black with old machine oil. On the back, just visible through grime, was a small green star sticker, crooked and pale. The same childish shape Lily had covered on Caleb's lunchbox minutes earlier. Caleb felt his breath slow. He did not reach for the tag. He did not say Lily's name. Some truths were too fragile to grab at the first time they appeared. Marcia Keene stepped closer, careful to keep her voice smooth. A loose tag, Your Honor. No collection record, no signed transfer, no documentation. Mr. Price could have obtained it anywhere in that facility over 4 years. That is possible, Judge Bell said. It is more than possible, Marcia replied. It is likely. Caleb watched the tag where it lay inside the clear sleeve. Something about it pulled at him, not only the sticker, not only the oil. The bottom edge was wrong. Not cut. Torn. There was a jagged white line where a perforated strip should have separated cleanly. He had handled hundreds of those tags at Harlan. They came in pairs. The tag itself, and a tear-off stub that stayed in the tag book with the worker's initials, time, machine line, and fault code. If this was a real Harlan lockout tag, then somewhere there had once been a matching stub. If the stub was gone, paper had been asked to keep a secret. Caleb raised his hand slightly. Your Honor. Judge Bell's eyes moved to him. Carefully, Mr. Mercer. May I ask one question about the tag? Not Mr. Price? Marcia began. Objection. He has not asked it yet, Judge Bell said. Caleb nodded, grateful but not triumphant. Does the bottom edge show a tear-off stub? The clerk turned the evidence sleeve under the desk lamp. The angle caught the torn fibers. Even from the gallery, the white fray looked fresh against the old oil. Judge Bell leaned forward. Marcia's lips parted, but no sound came. Victor Harlan spoke before his lawyer could stop him. Low but not low enough. There is no stub. Caleb turned his head just enough to see him. The room did not erupt. Tightened. Judge Bell's pen stopped moving. Mr. Harlan, she said. How would you know that? Victor's expression did not break, but his cufflink hand moved again, thumb pressing silver against bone. I mean, if this was never logged, there would be no stub. That was not what you said, Judge Bell replied. Lily leaned toward Caleb from the second row, her voice tiny but clear in the pause. Daddy, that red paper was already torn when it fell. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second, not because Lily had solved anything, but because she had noticed what adults were trying to step around. He set the lunchbox down gently, green star facing the floor. Your Honor, he said, if Harlan Industrial used standard lockout tags in 2022, then our 217 should have left pressure marks in the tag book, even if the stub was removed. Marcia recovered quickly. Speculation from a maintenance worker. From the maintenance worker accused of ignoring the tag system, Caleb said. I know how it works because I used it. Judge Bell looked at the tag again, then at Victor, then at Nolan, whose face had gone gray with fear and relief together. The court will order production of the original tag book for the relevant period, she said. Today. Marcia's smile vanished for less than a second. Less than a second was enough. And Caleb, staring at the torn bottom edge of lockout tag R217, realized the missing stub might still be speaking from a page everyone thought had been silenced. The missing stub arrived in Courtroom 4 inside a black evidence box carried by a Harlan Records supervisor who would not meet Caleb's eyes. The original tag book looked ordinary at first. Brown cover, bent corners, a spine softened by years of greasy hands and shift changes. Marcia Keene received it like a victory, not a surrender. She placed it under the courtroom camera, opened it to the relevant week, and showed the judge clean pages, neat numbers, no R217 stub, no Caleb Mercer initials, no written warning for press line 3. There is your answer, Your Honor, she said.
No estuve.
No record.
No misteri.
A few people in the gallery exhaled, and one chair scraped backward as if someone had already decided the poor mechanic had reached too far. Caleb stood still. He did not argue with the book. He watched it, paper, like steel, carried stress differently depending on how it had been handled. A man who had spent half his life repairing old equipment learned that damage rarely vanished. It only changed where it showed. Judge Marion Bell looked from the tag book to Caleb. "Mr. Mercer, you asked for this book. What exactly am I looking for?" Caleb glanced once toward Lily. She sat straighter now, the metal lunchbox tucked against her side, her small fingers resting on the green star sticker as if it were a quiet promise. Nolan Price sat at the witness table with both hands folded so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Caleb could have pointed at him, could have made the room look at his shame. He did not. "Pressure," Caleb said. Marcia gave a soft laugh. "Pressure? Yes, ma'am. From invisible ink, perhaps? From a ballpoint pen." The laugh moved through the room in a thin ripple. Caleb let it pass. He had heard that sound before, from supervisors who thought a work shirt meant a small mind, from men at the plant who called him slow because he checked a lock twice, from the company doctor who once asked if stress at home had made him careless. Judge Bell did not laugh. "Explain." Caleb stepped closer, stopping short of the evidence table until the clerk nodded. "Those tag books used carbonless sheets for the tear-off stubs the year I worked. Night maintenance. Even if someone removes a stub, the page above or below can keep pressure marks from the pen. Not always, but sometimes." Marcia crossed her arms. "And you know this because?" Caleb looked at the tag book, not at her. "Because my daughter drew stars on my lunch breaks, and I used to put the paper under my forms so her crayons would not mark the table." The answer quieted the room in a way no argument could. It was not heroic. It was not impressive. It was just true. Judge Bell set her pen down. The small click sounded louder than it should have. "What do you need?" Caleb nodded toward the clerk's desk. "The side lamp. Low angle. No touching from me." Marcia lifted a hand. "Your Honor, this is theater." "No," Judge Bell said. "This is inspection." The clerk carried the tag book to the side table, tilted a brass desk lamp low, and flattened the page marked R216 beneath a clear sheet. The light slid across the paper like dawn over a field, catching nothing at first but fibers, stains, and age. Victor Harlan sat with his hands folded, his face arranged into patient sadness. "We should be careful," he said softly. "A good man's confusion can become public harm if the court permits speculation." Caleb heard the words good man and public harm and felt them try to make Nolan smaller. He turned slightly toward the witness table. "Mr. Price is not confused," he said. "He is scared. There is a difference." Nolan closed his eyes. Judge Bell looked at Caleb for half a second longer than before. Then the clerk adjusted the lamp 1 inch lower. Something appeared. Not writing exactly. A ghost of writing. Pale grooves pressed into the page beneath the missing one. The courtroom camera magnified it on the screen, and the room leaned forward.
CM.
Then a dash. 11:42 p.m. Another dash. Press line 3. The final words took longer to find because the indentation was lighter near the edge. But when the clerk shifted the lamp again, they rose out of the paper like breath returning to a body. Sensor fault. The man in the back row who had laughed stopped moving. The air conditioner hummed above the jury box. Someone's phone vibrated and was silenced so quickly it sounded like guilt. Marcia's pearl earring trembled when she turned her head toward Victor. Caleb did not smile. He stared at those pressure marks with a heaviness that surprised him. For 4 years, he had carried the shame of people saying he ignored the machine. And now, on a page everyone thought was clean, his own initials were still trying to tell the truth. Judge Bell's voice lowered. "The court will mark the indentation photograph for identification. This is not yet conclusive, but it is relevant." Marcia stepped forward. "Your Honor, pressure marks do not prove Mr. Mercer performed a proper shutdown. They prove, at most, that someone wrote something on a page." "Then let us compare it with the service log," Judge Bell said. Victor's fingers tightened around his cufflink. "The service log system cannot be accessed from outside the company," he said. "No one suggested outside access," Judge Bell replied. The sentence hung there, simple and devastating. The clerk loaded the backup file obtained under the court's order. Lines of machine data filled the monitor. Temperatures, cycles, pressure readings, timestamps. Caleb could read them the way some men read weather. He saw normal production at 11:31. A pressure warning at 11:38. A sensor mismatch at 11:40. Then, at 11:42 p.m., the entry appeared. Manual shutdown attempted. The courtroom did not go silent all at once. It lost sound in layers. First the whispers stopped. Then the chair legs. Then even the paper in Marcia Keene's hand seemed to go still. Lily let out a breath so small only Caleb heard it. "Daddy," she whispered, not asking a question anymore. Caleb nodded once, still watching the screen. Nolan began to cry without making a sound. Caleb did not turn that grief into a weapon. He only said, "That is what I told them 4 years ago." Marcia recovered because polished systems recover quickly. A log entry can result from mechanical error, incomplete procedure, or an unauthorized attempt to interfere with operations. "Correct," Caleb said. "It does not finish the story." Judge Bell studied him. "But it changes it." Caleb looked at the tag book, the red tag sealed in plastic, and the glowing line on the service log. "Yes, Your Honor." Victor leaned toward Marcia and whispered something behind his hand, too low for the room but not for the camera near counsel table. Judge Bell noticed the movement and told the clerk, "Preserve all audio from this morning's proceedings and recess." Marcia's face stayed smooth, but her eyes changed. For the first time, the company was not managing Caleb's pain. It was managing its own exposure. Judge Bell ordered the full backup log, camera archive, and maintenance communications produced before the next session. Caleb returned to his table, lifted Lily's lunchbox, and felt the raised edge of the green star beneath his thumb. The proof was still small, still incomplete, still vulnerable to attack. But one thing could no longer be buried under polite smiles and charity pins. At 11:42 p.m., Caleb Mercer had tried to shut press line 3 down, and if the system said no one from outside could alter the record, then someone inside Harlan had made the truth disappear. The service log line stayed on the courtroom monitor long after everyone had read it. White letters against a dark screen, simple enough for a child to understand and heavy enough for grown men to fear. Manual shutdown attempted 11:42 p.m. Judge Marion Bell did not allow the room to rush past it. She asked the clerk to print the page, mark the timestamp, and place it beside the pressure mark photograph from the tag book. The printer at the side of the courtroom began to work, slow and mechanical, each sheet sliding out with a soft scrape that sounded almost like a machine breathing. Caleb Mercer watched the paper stack grow and felt something old inside him loosen, but only by an inch. Proof was not freedom yet. Proof was a door, and doors could still be blocked by people with enough money to stand in front of them. Marcia Keene stood with her hands folded, calm restored but thinner now. "Your Honor, a shutdown attempt does not establish proper procedure, causation, or corporate misconduct." "No," Judge Bell said. "It establishes that the prior record was incomplete." Victor Harlan lowered his chin in a gesture that looked like sorrow from a distance. "We have always cooperated with the court," he said softly. Caleb heard the word always and looked down at the metal lunchbox by his chair. Lily's green star caught a thin line of light. Always was the kind of word powerful people used when they hoped no one would ask for dates. The clerk loaded the next file, the camera archive from press line 3. The courtroom monitor changed from rows of data to grainy security footage. A high corner angle showed the plant floor 4 years earlier, the machine bay washed in harsh industrial light, yellow rails, gray concrete, red emergency stops, the dark mouth of the press. The timestamp read 11:38 p.m. A figure in a work shirt entered from the left. Caleb did not need a face to know the slope of his own shoulders. He remembered that night by smell. Hot oil, burnt dust, coolant, and Isaac Bellamy's coffee sitting untouched near the tool cart. The footage showed Caleb looking up at the fault light, then reaching for the lockout station. At 11:41, he moved toward the side panel. At 11:42, the screen flashed, staggered, and went black. When it returned, 17 minutes were gone. The next visible frame showed emergency lights and men running. The room fell into a different kind of quiet, not the stunned silence of revelation, but the colder silence of a missing piece shaped exactly like guilt. Marcia moved first. Server error. Common in older systems. 17 minutes? Judge Bell asked. Unfortunately, yes. Caleb did not speak. He looked at Nolan Price, who had both hands pressed flat to the witness table as if he were trying to keep himself from sinking through it. Nolan's eyes were fixed on the blank gap in time. Judge Bell turned to him. Mr. Price, did you review this archive before signing your final report? Nolan swallowed. I reviewed what I was given. That is not my question. His voice dropped. No, Your Honor. I reviewed the first report. The one that said censor fault. The one that said Caleb tagged the line. Marcia's head turned sharply. Mr. Price. Caleb saw Nolan flinch at his own name, and for one painful second, the old anger rose in Caleb like steam under pressure. 4 years of rent notices. 4 years of Lily. Hearing whispers at school pickup. 4 years of Isaac Bellamy's widow crossing the street because grief needed someone to blame. Caleb could have let Nolan burn. He could have watched the room strip him down and call it justice. Instead, Caleb stepped half a pace forward and spoke to the judge, not the lawyer. Your Honor, if Mr. Price is going to answer, he should answer without being threatened from counsel table. Marcia's eyes narrowed. I did not threaten him. Then it should be easy to stop. Judge Bell's gaze settled on Caleb. There was no pity in it, only assessment. Then she said, Ms. Keene, let the witness answer. Nolan breathed in, shallow and broken. There were 2 reports. The first one listed a censor fault on press line 3 and noted that lockout procedure had been attempted by C. Mercer at 11:42. The second report removed both. Who ordered the change? Judge Bell asked. Nolan looked toward Victor, then away. I was told it came from corporate. Victor gave a sad, patient sigh. This is what guilt does to memory. The sentence was gentle enough to pass for mercy and cruel enough to do damage. Nolan struggled with alcohol then. We supported him through that. Our company believes in second chances. Caleb looked at Nolan's hands. The bronze recovery coin was there, half hidden between his fingers. 4 years clean. Caleb remembered picking it up from the courthouse floor. He remembered choosing not to open the envelope. Quiet decisions had a way of becoming louder later. 4 years clean, Caleb said. He was sober 6 months before the accident. Marcia turned. You are not his counselor. No, Caleb said. I read what his coin said when everyone else stepped away from him. Judge Bell asked the clerk to request Nolan's treatment verification already listed in the Discovery Index. It came within minutes, sent by the county clinic and stamped with dates. The screen showed the record plainly. Nolan Price had entered recovery before the accident, not after. It did not make him innocent. It made him harder to erase. Victor reached for a glass of water and missed it by half an inch before correcting his hand. Almost no one saw. Caleb did. Judge Bell did too. Then came the smaller thing, the thing no one in a suit had cared about because it cost less than lunch. A maintenance receipt from Milner's Hardware, scanned crooked, dated 2 weeks before the accident. $13.18 for a fuse link, paid in cash, signed Caleb Mercer. In blue ink beside the item line, someone had written press line 3 sensor relay. Marcia nearly smiled. A private purchase proves nothing except that Mr. Mercer was improvising outside approved channels. Caleb looked at the receipt. He remembered standing under the hardware store awning in the rain, counting bills from his glove box, because the replacement request had been denied twice and the fault light kept coming back. He remembered Lily waiting in the truck, drawing stars on the fogged window. I filed the request, he said. Purchasing said anything under $25 needed supervisor approval if it involved line stoppage. Judge Bell turned to Harlan's counsel. Produce the policy. The policy appeared on screen 10 minutes later, and beneath it, another date. The rule requiring high-level approval for low-cost safety replacements had been updated 3 days after Caleb's second request and 4 days before the accident. Victor adjusted his cufflink again. Policies evolve. Judge Bell's voice was quiet. Apparently, so do stories. Then the clerk brought up the corporate filing for the family's first worker fund. Victor had said it had always existed for families affected by workplace tragedy. The filing date glowed on the screen, 1 week after Isaac Bellamy died. The courtroom lights seemed to harden. Even the reporters stopped typing for a moment. Charity had been built, yes, but not before the harm. After. Close enough to comfort the public. Late enough to control the damage. Nolan covered his face with one hand. Caleb looked at him and made the choice again. Not revenge. Not yet. Not ever, if revenge meant weakening the truth by turning it into rage. His past is not your eraser, Caleb said, his voice low. And my poverty is not your proof. Judge Bell looked from the service log to the missing camera footage, from the receipt to the fund record, from Nolan's recovery file to the red tag sealed in plastic. Her face did not soften, but the case changed shape in her hands. It was no longer a poor man's complaint against a company. It was a pattern, and patterns were harder to bury. Victor leaned toward Marcia and whispered, "End this in chambers." Judge Bell heard enough. She closed the folder before her with one controlled motion. "No," she said. "This will not be handled behind closed doors." Caleb felt Lily's small hand find the back of his sleeve. On the monitor, the missing 17 minutes sat between one frame and the next, black and silent, waiting for a public confrontation no one at Harlan could politely avoid anymore. By late afternoon, the court's order had carried them out of polished wood and marble and back to the place where the truth had first been buried. Harlan Industrial Foods stood on the edge of Ashford like a gray ship on a flat sea, its loading bays lined with trucks, its flags snapping in the cold Ohio wind. A portable court recorder had been set on a folding table near the entrance to press line 3. 2 deputies stood by the yellow safety rail. Judge Marion Bell arrived without her robe, wearing a dark coat and carrying the same leather folder she had kept on the bench. But the authority in her face had not changed. Victor Harlan greeted her at the plant door with both hands open, his silver family's first pin bright against his suit. "Your Honor," he said, voice soft enough for cameras. "We welcome transparency." Caleb Mercer stepped out of his rusted pickup a few cars behind them, tired in the shoulders, one hand carrying the metal lunchbox, the other holding Lily's. He did not walk like a man who had won anything. He walked like a father who knew his child was watching how truth behaved when it had to pass through fear. Lily stayed close, backpack straps tight in both hands, her eyes moving from the factory doors to her father's boots. "Is this where it happened?" she whispered. Caleb looked at the long building, the windows clouded with dust from years of production. "This is where people should have told the truth," he said. Inside, the plant smelled like cold. Grease, old flour dust, disinfectant, and new paint. The new paint was the first thing Caleb noticed. Press line 3 had been dressed up like a witness before testimony. Fresh white lines had been rolled across the concrete. New warning signs hung from bright screws. A safety banner stretched above the line. "Every family matters." Victor led the group slowly, almost reverently, as if he were walking them through a memorial he had personally built. "We shut this line down after the incident," he said. "We upgraded cameras, rails, signage, training procedures. We did everything a responsible company does when tragedy strikes." Marcia Keene added, "It is important to understand that what you are seeing today is a facility that has changed. Any missing footage from years ago must be viewed in that context. There it was, the first recovery of control. Server error became old system. Missing tag became poor records. Fresh paint became responsibility." A reporter near the back lowered his phone slightly, as though the explanation almost made sense. Judge Bell did not respond. She only looked toward Caleb. "Mr. Mercer, you asked that press line 3 be inspected." Caleb nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Proceed carefully. I won't touch the machine." Victor gave a small, sympathetic smile. "For everyone's safety, that is wise." Caleb let the insult pass. He handed Lily the lunchbox and told her to stand beside the deputy, away from the rail. She obeyed, small and serious, both arms around the metal box. Caleb walked to the side of the line where the old lockout station had once been mounted. He did not look at the new signs. He looked below them. A maintenance man knew where the hands had gone before the paint did. On the concrete floor near the left support post, beneath the clean white stripe, there was a faint brown crescent where heat had kissed metal dust into the surface. Above it, 2 screw holes sat slightly off-level, filled but not fully hidden under fresh paint. Caleb crouched without kneeling, just low enough to see. "The rail used to be here," he said. Victor answered too quickly. "Rails are moved during safety upgrades." "After a court preservation letter?" Caleb asked. The factory went quiet in a different way than the courtroom had. In a plant, silence had texture. Fans still turned overhead. Somewhere a compressor clicked. But the human noise stopped. Marcia stepped in. "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer is speculating about routine maintenance. Plants evolve. Equipment gets repaired." Judge Bell looked at the Harlan Records supervisor. "Do we have invoices for work performed on this rail?" The supervisor swallowed, opened a tablet, and after Marcia gave the smallest nod, pulled up a file. The invoice showed rail replacement, repainting, lockout station relocation. The date was 2 days after Harlan received the court's discovery notice for physical evidence related to Press Line 3. Victor's smile held, but only at the edges. "We had no intention of concealing anything," he said. "The work was scheduled." Caleb stood. "Then the work order will show the schedule date." The supervisor looked down. His thumb hovered. He did not open another page. That was the second shift in the room. Not proof yet. But fear had a body, and everyone could see it standing there in a company polo, staring at a tablet as if a date could burn through glass. Judge Bell said, "Preserve that device and the full work order history." Marcia's voice cooled. "Your Honor, this is becoming burdensome." "Truth often is," Judge Bell said. Nolan Price stood near the folding table, pale beneath the fluorescent plant lights. The brown envelope was gone now, replaced by the old flip phone he had surrendered to the clerk but had asked to identify on site. His black plastic case was scratched, the hinge loose. He held it like a relic of cowardice. Caleb looked at him once, not pushing. Nolan had already begun paying. Caleb would not add humiliation and call it justice. Victor saw the phone and exhaled through his nose. "Nolan," he said almost tenderly, "you have carried guilt for years. Do not let it turn ordinary conversations into accusations." Nolan's hand shook. The court recorder's red light glowed. Judge Bell said, "Play the message." The clerk connected the phone to a small speaker. For a moment there was only static, a thin hiss like wind passing under a closed door. Then Victor Harlan's voice filled the plant, lower than his public voice, stripped of charity and light. "Clean the first report before auditors see the tag." The words moved through Press Line 3 and found every place they had been missing from. Lily tightened her arms around the lunchbox. One deputy looked at the floor. Marcia Keene recovered first. "That recording lacks context. Could refer to any internal draft. It does not identify Mr. Mercer, Press Line 3, or misconduct." For a heartbeat, Victor almost had the story again. Context, draft, procedure, words smooth enough to blur a blade. Caleb looked at the old lockout station, then at the 2 painted over holes, then at the service log printout in Judge Bell's folder. He spoke without raising his voice. "It identifies the tag." Victor turned toward him. "Many tags exist in a plant, Mr. Mercer." "Yes," Caleb said, "but not many were missing from a page marked 1142. Press Line 3, sensor fault." Judge Bell's eyes moved to Victor. Victor's face remained controlled, but his mouth betrayed him. That first report call was about confusion after the accident. Marcia closed her eyes for less than a second. Judge Bell heard it. Caleb heard it. Even Nolan heard it because he made a sound that was not quite a sob. "The first report call," Judge Bell repeated. "You recognize it as that specific call?" Victor's cufflink hand rose, then stopped halfway. "I meant based on what has been alleged today." No languisper." Then louder, with the recorder catching every broken syllable. No, he knew. He knew before I changed it. Caleb looked at Nolan and shook his head once, not to silence him, but to steady him. Tell it clean, he said. Not angry, clean. Nolan nodded, tears standing in his eyes. The first report said sensor fault. It said Caleb attempted lockout. It said Isaac Bellamy was still inside the danger zone when the line tried to cycle again. I was told to remove the tag reference before the auditors came. The plant seemed to grow colder. Above them, the Every Family Matters banner stirred in the draft from the ventilation system. Lily whispered from behind the deputy, Daddy, that star on. The lunchbox looks like the one on the red tag. Caleb turned just slightly. I know, baby. He had known enough to fear it, not enough to use it yet. Judge Bell closed her folder. We returned to Ashford County Courthouse immediately. The tag, the phone, the rail invoice, the service log, and the tagbook photographs will be reviewed together on the record. Victor stepped forward. Your Honor, I strongly object to turning a site inspection into a public spectacle. Judge Bell looked at the white paint covering old screw holes, then at the speaker that had just carried his voice through the factory. Mr. Harlan, she said. The spectacle began when evidence was painted over. Caleb took Lily's lunchbox back and guided her toward the exit, keeping himself between her and the press. Behind them, Nolan placed the old flip phone into the clerk's evidence bag with both hands. The final piece was no longer hidden in a hallway, a settlement clause, or a man's guilty memory. It was waiting under courthouse lights, sealed in plastic, ready to be turned over so the green star on the back of lockout tag, R. 217, could either collapse the story forever or make the whole room fall silent. The clerk placed lockout tag R217 beneath the document camera, and the courtroom screen filled with red warning plastic, scorched fibers, black machine oil, and one small green star almost hidden under grime. No one spoke at first. Judge Marion Bell leaned forward, her glasses low on her nose, while the forensic technician adjusted the light until the back of the tag appeared sharp enough for everyone in courtroom 4 to see. Rotate it slightly, she said. The technician obeyed. The green star caught the light. Lily's hand tightened around Caleb Mercer's fingers. Across the aisle, Victor Harlan sat very still. His silver family's first pin no longer shining like virtue, but like something cold pinned over a wound. Marcia Keene rose halfway. Your Honor, the defense maintains that a child sticker proves nothing about chain of custody. Sit down, Miss Keene, Judge Bell said. Not loudly. She did not need volume anymore. The room had begun listening to smaller things. The buzz of the projector, the click of the technician's mouse, Nolan Price's uneven breathing, a reporter's pen stopping against a notepad. The technician changed the display to a thermal damage comparison. The adhesive residue beneath the sticker shows heat exposure consistent with the burn pattern along the left edge of the tag, he said. The sticker was on the tag before the heat event. It was not added later. A whisper moved through the gallery and died before becoming sound. Caleb looked down, not at Victor, not at Marcia, not even at the screen. He looked at Lily. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. She stared at the green star as though some tiny part of her childhood had walked into court and told the truth for her father. Judge Bell nodded to the clerk. Next image. The screen changed. An old photo appeared, slightly blurry, the colors warm with age. Harlan Industrial Foods, 4 years earlier. A Family Safety Day banner. Caleb younger by grief, kneeling beside Lily, then 5 years old, as she pressed a green star sticker onto a red lockout tag hanging from his work belt. Beside them sat the same metal lunchbox now resting under Caleb's chair. The same crooked sticker shown on its lid. Caleb heard Lily inhale, a small shaken sound. That's me, she whispered. The words were not testimony. They were just a child recognizing herself. But the room felt them. Judge Bell let the photo remain on the screen long enough for every adult who had laughed at Caleb's lunchbox to understand what they had missed. Then she said, place the tagbook image beside it. The screen split. On the left, Lily's old photo. On the right, the pressure mark photograph from the tagbook. CM 11:42 p.m. Press line 3, sensor fault. Then came the service log. Manual shutdown attempted. 11:42 p.m. Then the camera archive. Caleb moving toward the lockout station at 11:41, followed by 17 missing minutes. Then the Milner's hardware receipt. $13.18. Press line 3, sensor relay. Caleb Mercer in blue ink. Then the rail invoice. Replacement and repainting 2 days after the court preservation notice. Then the old flip phone recording played once more through the courtroom speakers. Victor Harlan's private voice stripped bare. Clean the first report before auditors see the tag. Each piece alone had been attackable. Together, they began to sound like a door locking from the inside. Marcia tried one more time. Your Honor, the recording remains disputed, and the company has not conceded misconduct. Judge Bell looked at Victor. Mr. Harlan, did you refer to a first report during the site inspection? Victor's throat moved. His hand went to his cufflink, then stopped as if even that habit had become evidence. I was speaking in general terms. You also stated moments ago at the plant that you were protecting the company. His eyes flicked toward the reporters. Any CEO would protect his company from misunderstanding. Caleb's voice entered softly. Isaac Bellamy was not a misunderstanding. The room went still around the name. Not the deceased employee. Not the incident. Isaac Bellamy. A man with a lunch pail, a family, a life that had not been profitable enough to preserve in Victor's speeches. Nolan Price stood, gripping the edge of the witness table. His face had gone gray, but his voice came out clear enough. He didn't ruin the machine, Nolan said. He tried to save Isaac Bellamy's life, and I helped them bury the proof. Marcia whispered, Nolan, don't. Nolan did not look at her. He looked at Caleb. I signed the second report. I let them take your job, your name, and your daughter's peace. I told myself I was saving the plant. I was saving my pension. I was saving myself. His knees weakened. Caleb moved before the bailiff did. He crossed the small space and caught Nolan by the elbow, steadying him in front of everyone who had expected revenge to look more satisfying than mercy. Stand, Caleb said quietly. Tell it clean. Nolan nodded, crying now, but not hiding. Victor told me the fund would take care of the family. He said no one needed another public scandal. He said Caleb was already broke, already tired, already easy to blame. The last sentence landed harder than shouting. Victor's folder slid off the edge of counsel table and scattered papers across the floor. He did not bend to pick them up. For the first time all day, no one moved to help him. Judge Bell removed her glasses and set them beside the gavel. The small sound of plastic touching would carried through the room. The court will enter lockout tag R217 into evidence, she said. The court further orders the transcript, the forensic findings, the site inspection record, the service log, the tagbook images, the rail invoice, the Milner's hardware receipt, and the audio recording transferred to the appropriate investigative authorities, including OSHA and the county prosecutor's office. Marcia opened her mouth, then closed it. Victor stared straight ahead, face pale beneath the careful tan, his eyes avoiding the camera lens pointed from the press row. Judge Bell continued. For the record, this court finds substantial evidence that Mr. Caleb Mercer attempted to shut down press line 3 in accordance with safety procedure, and that prior representations to the contrary are now seriously impeached. The words did not heal 4 years. They did not pay the rent due Friday. They did not bring Isaac Bellamy back. But they did something Caleb had almost stopped believing a room full of strangers could do. They stopped calling him a liar. Lily rose from the second row without stepping into the aisle. She simply stood there, clutching the metal lunchbox to her chest, green star facing outward, and whispered, Daddy told the truth. That was when the courtroom fell into quiet dignity. No applause. No gasp. No dramatic shout. Just silence deep enough to hear the projector fan, the rain ticking against the courthouse windows, and Nolan Price trying not to break apart in the arms of the man he had harmed. Caleb did not smile. He did not look at Victor to see him fall. He only held Nolan steady, looked back at Lily, and breathed as if the truth had finally been allowed into his lungs. And now that the court had given Caleb back his name, the only question left was what kind of man he would choose to be with the power of being believed.